Hey guys, I'm just trying to get Jake in here. So just be patient here.
Hey,
Yeah,
what's
what's
going
up, Jake?
on?
How are you?
Doing good, doing good.
See you. So yeah, just let's see here. There's a few people join in. Hopefully, how's your day, man?
It's been good. I've been off of work for like 2 hours. Got some Chick-fil-A in me, and I'm feeling good. What about you?
Oh, there you go. Yeah, I just got back. I'm meeting some friends for lunch and late lunch, and yeah, the conversation was good. I was like, I have to have another commitment to. So
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
yeah, no, it's exciting. Yeah, thanks
I saw
again for
your. I was gonna say I
with
saw your Instagram over the past couple of days. Looks like your Airbnb has been fairly busy.
Yeah, yeah, thank God, man. We I just talked to someone that's relocating from Illinois, so they're looking for a new house and they're gonna stay here for a month plus, and yeah, they're interested in extending so till they find a house.
That's cool,
Um,
man.
yeah, are we good with the internet and everything?
Yeah, everything's looking good on my end.
Okay, I can hear you. All right, cool. All right, well, let's get started, man. So just kind of give you a little bit of background. This whole page, this whole Instagram thing is about personal finance, and a lot of
Hmm.
times, part of this is finding ways to increase your income, right? And also, for me at a personal level, right, trying to build that generational wealth for kids and the rest of my family and whatnot, right? So I think we're all in the same boat as far as increasing our income, and a lot of that deals with building side hustles or renegotiating your salary and whatnot, right? But I love to bring in guests like you because a lot of people are already in that mindset and or they're already doing it, right? And for
Yeah,
me, again, at a personal level, I'm still learning about real estate. I have a real estate company, but I'm also, I love listening to people like you because you already done things that I want to do, right? So uh,
sure, sure.
to give people a little bit of background, I met Jake at some at a real estate event, and so we struck a conversation, and he mentioned things that he was doing, and I was like, you know what, I want to have you as a guest for my Instagram channel because I think he'll provide a lot of value for people that are also whether they're looking to learn about real estate or they're ready to jump into buying a single or multifamily home. But anyways, yeah, just as a reminder, yeah, this is a mainly personal finance. So let's start there. So I want to
Absolutely.
ask you real quick, Jake, can you give us a brief introduction of yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So my name is Jake. 26 years old. I work in real estate finance right now. I've been out of college for about 5 years. And similar to yourself, I kind of have always been interested in the like FIRE, financial independence, retire early type
Right.
movements. But the main part of that was real estate because that's where my interest kind of lied. So my first couple years out of college, I started off at corporate America, trying to save up a nest egg to invest in real estate. And over the past 2 years, I bought two properties so far. One was my primary residence, which I actually flipped. It was like a gut job. I mean, the house was I the house was worth less than what I put in on the rehab. So it was, to give you an idea of how much work it needed. Um, and then through that is how I kind of found my 6 unit property a little later on down the road, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But yeah, still work the 9 to 5. I have a couple other like side hustles. I have an e-commerce business, Amazon drop shipping, which is only 3 months old, but going pretty strong so far for 3 months. So definitely definitely happy to contribute for sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're resonating a lot with me. I
Yeah,
think I
yeah,
looked into dropshipping a few earlier this year, and I was like, I'm not prepared for it, but I'm happy that it's working out for you, and I'm sure I'll pick your brain later on, right? But just to take it a step back, what was your relationship with money growing up?
So, so my relationship growing up was actually save everything I could, which was looking back, I wish I would have looked at it a little bit differently. I've kind of changed my relationship with money more recently now that I have more money, which is kind of funny how that works. But yeah, and when I was very young, I was always like saving my birthday money, other things like that, but I didn't really know what I was saving toward. So I would save it up, save it up, save it up, and then have like a couple $1,000s at 14 years old, but then I'd go spend it on like a computer rig or something like that, always trying to like on my connections breaking out. Just to like to see what my money was able to buy me, right? If I waited, I could buy this really awesome computer or whatever technology. So that's what it was, and that's kind of what it's been up until kind of recently.
Gotcha. What do you think was the kind of flip of a switch between, that kind of saving mentality versus, oh, I gotta invest.
Um, well, I had a good amount of money saved, which allowed me to buy my first house. But that first property, I bought it right in the beginning of COVID, and as you know, as COVID progressed, the cost to rehab my house just went through the roof.
Yeah.
And I was kind of looking back, and I was saying, man, let's just say I had $85,000 in the bank, but it was just sitting in the bank. Had I put that money in the stock market or other places while I was finding my next investment opportunity, those numbers would have looked a lot bigger, which I'm like,
Yeah.
kicking myself. But once I started rehabbing my house and I found my 6 unit apartment, I was strapped for cash. So the little cash that I kind of did have in the bank, I'm like, okay, I can't let it sit. I have to figure out a way to grow this so I can keep investing in real estate and other things. So I feel like what really changed my mindset is knowing what money can do for me,
Hmm.
but not having enough of it anymore. So figuring out how to make what I do have grow so I can keep doing what I want to do. You know what I'm saying? So
So true. So, I guess, jumping into the real estate piece of it, what is, I guess for people that don't know, what is multifamily, I guess, real estate, and how does it differ from, like, single family type of
yeah,
units?
yeah, sure. So there's two types of, I guess you can say multifamily. You have residential and commercial. Residential is 4 units or below. And all that really means is the type of financing that you can get on it, right? You can, as a homeowner, you and I can live in the property, rent the other 3 units out, and get like a conventional owner occupied mortgage. But and then commercial is 5 units or above, and it can go up to hundreds, even thousands of units in some
Wow.
cases. But it's essentially just apartments, right? People need places to live, and their accommodations in one way or another. It could be just a house in a neighborhood that has 2 units side by side, or it could be a 7-story apartment or 20-story high rise that you see in Midtown or downtown that $5,000 a month, $10,000 a month rents. So it can range, but it's basically housing in terms of apartments. So
Gotcha. And I guess, yeah, I guess, tell us how you came to acquire your sixth unit, and what was how did that even come about?
yeah, sure. So I was working in like corporate finance, like I was saying, but I was working in the energy industry. And being in Houston, energy is pretty popular. But I was trying to figure out a way, like on the side, to invest in real estate. That's really what I was passionate about. So then I was looking for my first property, which is the house that I live in. And so I connected with the realtor, and she showed me a few properties, and I was kind of just becoming familiar with the area that I wanted to buy in. Right, I wasn't necessarily. I didn't think I was ready to buy something yet. I wasn't really sure what I was looking for. She actually showed me a couple fixer-upper properties, and I told myself, well, I don't want to get into such big of a project for my first one. But fast forward, as I took some action, I became more comfortable with um, taking on a fixer-upper. So as I was looking, an opportunity came up with a friend of mine who's a wholesaler, and he's a good friend from college. And he said, "Hey, we have this property over, in that area by U of H. Are you interested?" So I walked it with my contractor at the time, and the numbers seemed to work. I knew I wanted to live in this area. I was going to get married shortly after fixing it up. So I just pulled the trigger. I trusted my contractor at the time. I trusted the wholesaler that gave me the property. So the last thing was to just trust myself and the education that I gave myself to just make the decision. So I feel like I had a good team in place to finally pull the trigger. So that's where my first property came about. But as I was rehabbing that property, a couple doors down, I saw this vacant unit, 6-unit property. And keep in mind, my first project is like a heavy rehab. It's like $160,000 rehab. First project, I'm in way over my head, right? But I see this property a few doors down the road, and I tell my fiance at the time, wife now, that I don't know what it is about that property, but we're gonna own that one day, So she's like, yeah, she believed me, but she's like, okay, one day could be 2, 3 years, 5 years down the road.
Sure.
Especially because, all my money's going into the property that I own now. Well, fast forward 2 months, I call the owner and I just reach out and I find his contact info and I say, would you be interested in selling? And that started the conversation to close on the property just a couple months later.
Wow.
But it wasn't that easy because the issue was I didn't really have the money to take down the property myself. So it was pretty cool. During my journey of looking for my first property, I met this really cool real estate agent, and her husband actually invests and owns property in this area as well. So I reached out to him saying, would you be interested in partnering with me on this 6-unit property that I found? And he said he was, and he actually knew 2 other people that were interested in investing as well. So through that, I was actually able to find, ended up being 2 partners on the deal. So I was actually able to take it down with 2 guys, Griffin and Garrett, which is really helpful because if I didn't find them, I wouldn't have been able to do it myself. So.
Wow. And I guess when well, first of all, I love that you manifested that you wanted that house, because I think I'm a big believer in manifesting things, and I think that helps you, set some long-term goals, whether, they're one day, 10 years, regardless, right? It keeps you in track, but that's one. And 2 is, how do you even approach how, I guess, you walk me through the steps of. One is, how did you determine this was a good property to buy? How did you go about, like, I don't know if it needed, I believe you mentioned when I talked to you, needed repairs and things like that. So how do I even know if this is a good property or how did you approach that?
Yeah, sure. So it's actually helpful that I had partners on the deal because looking at it by myself, I was kind of very eager. So they were originally asking like $460,000 for the property, but it needed like $400,000 in rehab, which I didn't know it would need that much. I mean, I knew it would need a lot of rehab, but I wasn't sure. But once I had 2 partners in, both my partners are in real estate. One's a real estate attorney, one's a real estate like asset manager. So they were also able to provide, professional perspective on that. But essentially how it started is we toured the property all together, just understanding, with our contractor to understand how much rehab it would actually need. And then that's where you kind of start in the negotiations there. So essentially how it worked is we thought the property would maybe be worth like 800 grand once it was all said and done. And we needed to put $400,000 into it. So, and we wanted to leave some equity into the property. We wanted to like walk away with some equity built in. So if it's 400 in rehab, we want to pay no more than like 350 for the actual property. So that's kind of how we reverse engineered it. So speaking to the seller was actually a pretty big real estate investor here in Houston. He owns a lot of stuff in Rice Village and River Oaks area. And this property that I'm talking about is over in the East End. So, and this is also during COVID. So he wasn't really interested in making much money on the deal. He just kind of wanted to get rid of a problem property for him. and he wasn't as familiar with like he didn't have as much passion for the area as we did. Like we know what this area is going to be in 5 years from now.
Yes.
Like
Yep.
it's already changed. I mean, I think our property is probably worth. We wanted it to be worth 800, but I think it's probably worth 875 to $900,000 right now, as is, which is really really nice. So essentially, what we did is we gave him a couple different options. So the seller offered to actually seller finance the property as well. And what that means is we didn't have to go out and get a traditional loan to uh, Rob. That's my buddy in New York. Um, so let me just go back a little bit. So we knew how much we wanted to pay for the property, which was no more than 350. We kind of went back and forth with the seller, and we gave him three options because he was going to seller finance it. So we said, we'll give you whatever, $346,000 if you finance it at 4%, or sorry, we'll give you like $346,000 if you finance it at 6%, or sorry, 346 if you finance it at 4%, or we'll give you 330 if you finance it at 5%, or we'll give you 325 if you finance it at 4% interest or 6% interest, something like that. So we gave him three different options essentially, so he could choose from, which I learned is a little bit of a negotiating strategy, right? Versus like, hey, here's our only offer.
Yeah.
If you give him three offers, he's compelled to at least choose one of them as compared to just coming back and say no. So
Right.
he chose the option at 4% interest. So we got a seller financing at 4% interest only for 2 years, which was this is a 6-unit property, so it's considered commercial real estate. That's pretty lucky on your first deal to get that. And the icing on top of the cake was he was actually willing to finance a lot of the construction costs as well. And so, in your traditional scenario, when you buy a property like this, a bank's going to require at least 20% down at the closing table to get this
Yep.
deal done. Okay. So on a $750,000 project, we would have needed to bring $150,000 day one. Well, the way we arranged this is we were able to bring $65,000 day one, and then the other $100,000 was drawn out over the remainder of a year. So we didn't really need all the money up front. We could just buy the property and then keep saving from our day jobs and pay off the rest of the down payment as the year went on. So that's what made it really interesting as well. If we didn't have that structure, we probably wouldn't have been able to take the property down.
Wow. No, it's yeah. I recently learned about owner finance. So I'm glad y'all took that approach because I think most people believe, even myself in the past, thought that I needed to reach out to a hard money lender, and that's a lot more complicated, especially
And
with lack of
expensive.
experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the reason I thought it'd be really nice to bring you on board because I think many of us are not even aware that that's an option, and more I'm learning about owner financing, I realized that part of those down payment could be part of the repair cost itself, right? And yeah, so real quick, can you touch a little bit of so what happens during a owner finance versus going through the traditional bank or
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I actually had to learn all of this. I knew nothing about any of this. I agreed to stuff where I'm like, well, we'll agree to it, but we'll find a lawyer to figure it out, right? And that's where it's kind of like, what is it? You kind of build your parachute after you jump out on the way down type
yeah,
of thing.
yeah,
Um, so essentially how it works is it's really simple. It's just a promissory note that's written between the seller and us. So they're the first lien holder on the property, and it's just like any other bank, except there's less hoops to jump through. And all you do is at the title company, whenever you're closing and signing all the documents, you add in that promissory note, just saying, the seller says, we have this note on the property. It comes due in 2 years. If they don't pay it back, obviously we can get the rights to the property if they default. Um, Also, interest payments are due the 16th of every month or whatever the date is. So it kind of lays out fairly simply what the terms of the agreement are. I think it was no more than 2 pages, to be honest. which
Oh,
you don't, it's not a complicated thing. People make it seem like it's such a complicated thing, but it's really pretty simple. It's just a couple documents on paper. Now, the contract itself was like probably close to a couple hundred pages because you have the contract to buy the property with all the terms, and you have to describe like when we're going to be paying out these, installments of our down payment over the course of the note. And then you have to lump into it the construction part of it. So an interesting thing about this deal is the sellers actually owned a construction company.
oh,
So we allowed them to do the construction for us because we knew that either our guy that we know is going to make a fee or the seller is going to make a fee from the construction. We would rather the seller make a fee because he would be more open to giving us a better deal because he's making money regardless, right?
yeah.
So and also that gave them comfort that they knew that the work was going to be done correctly, because the issue was you got three new guys that are taking on a big project. Let's say they hire a contractor and it all goes south. Well, now we're stuck with a property that's more messed up than it was when we gave it to you.
Exactly.
So it was like provided safety. But on the other end of it, it kind of was a conflict of interest because, they're holding the note, but also they're in charge of the construction. So if we didn't trust these guys, they could have like delayed construction and made things a living hell for us. But luckily, that wasn't the case.
That's the case. Yeah.
So, yeah, and obviously we had to like set up an LLC. We had to uh, write up an operating agreement, which is essentially like an agreement between you and your partners in the company on everything that's going to happen, right? How much money each person's going to contribute. If things go south, what's going to happen? If someone dies, what happens? How money is distributed once we sell, once we make money every month, type of thing. So all that stuff was done from a lawyer here in town. He's like, all over the different Facebook groups and stuff like that. So he was really helpful as well, but kind of just figuring out along the way.
On the way, yeah.
Yeah.
Was there any? I guess that's an interesting point about the LLC. Was there? Was that the best approach, or that was suggested? I'm curious about that.
Man, there's like other, I guess, entities you can put it into, but LLC is just the easiest.
Easy.
And it's just recommend, especially if it's just one property and it's your first one, it's the best. I think it's the best way to go for sure.
Gotcha. Okay. And so I'm not sure if I mentioned or he mentioned or if I missed it, but was the home was vacant or was there any tenants in there?
Yeah. So the home was mostly vacant. There was one guy living in the back. He probably, I mean, he probably shouldn't have been living there, but it was like okay conditions. But he was living there because the owners just liked someone keeping eyes on the property. I don't think he was even paying rent, to be honest.
Wow.
Um, but they delivered the house vacant, right? So we didn't have to worry about having to evict somebody. They pretty much said, "Hey, we're selling the property. Make sure you move out by this date," and we had it free and clear. Now, we did have like a fixed fee contract, which is very important to us. On my property, my first property, like I said, I went into it pretty with a lot of ignorance. My contractor walked it a couple times. He gave me a number and I said, "Yeah, let's do it. The numbers work." Well, the numbers weren't detailed enough. So as the project went along, there was a lot of change orders, meaning like, "Hey, we didn't account for the foundation to be this bad, so now it's an extra $5,000," or "We didn't account for lumber prices to skyrocket during COVID, so now
Yeah,
it's
especially
another,
during COVID.
yeah,
Correct. Yeah.
$10,000." So that was my biggest fear. And so we agreed to a fixed fee contract, meaning everything that's agreed to, regardless of if material prices go up or if lumber prices go up, it's covered under a fixed fee. And the only thing that's not covered are the unexpected items, right? Like, oh, well, there's termite damage. We need to like spray it down for termites and stuff like that. So we did have a handful of those items. But it was such a big rehab. Like the rehab was 40 grand, 400,000. and I think we probably had no more than like 20 grand of changes. So 5%, which is we were okay with that, you know. So
Yeah.
which was okay, um, and that's what made it a lot less stressful on us. Also, you know, it's interest. It was interest only payments, so meaning I'm only paying interest on my mortgage. We're not paying any principal. So our monthly payments were pretty manageable. I think, you know, they got to no more than $2,500 a month, split between three people. I mean, it
Yeah,
was,
that's
yeah,
not bad.
it wasn't bad, right? But now we're in a situation to where our note's coming due here in November, and we need to refinance out of it. And if you've been following the interest rate environment right now, it's
Very why not?
a little bit more, a little bit more than we were hoping for, but it's okay because we were conservative in the beginning, so we'll be all right.
Gotcha. So is the plan to refinance and then sell, or you're gonna hold?
We're gonna hold on to it. We're gonna refinance out. We There's a concept called cash out refinance, meaning like once you refinance the property, you can actually pull out some more cash instead of just get a new note on it. I don't think we'll be able to do that just because where interest rates are, but we'll just get a new loan on it, probably like a 10-year loan, and just hang on to it. We have no, when we got into the property, we were believed in the area for, you know, a long time. So we're okay hanging on to it for a handful of years and seeing what happens for sure.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that's one of the areas that's being revitalized. So I think there's a lot of interest there, a lot of growth. So I think, from a personal opinion, I think it was a good move. Um, so you mentioned, there was the cost and a few other things. So what are some of the other challenges that y'all faced, especially being a partner deal?
A partner deal?
Well, just any challenges in general.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I will say, I mean, for the partner side of it, I was pretty lucky to where we all kind of are fairly easygoing, right? We're open to each other's opinions and perspectives. Um, in the beginning, though, when you don't really know each other, that's hard to, there's some conversations in the beginning like, hey, we just met a month ago, but let's talk about what's going to happen to this property once, if you die, or if like, if we don't agree with on stuff, what do we have? So you kind of have to navigate that with some diplomacy in the beginning, but that was good. Also, relationship with the contractor and the seller. Um, there's things that came up that they weren't expecting, and it impacts them, but also it impacts us. So there's some things like that you just want to compromise on because it's not worth burning a relationship. Um, so things like we thought that one of the roofs were covered in their initial bid, and they came back and said it wasn't. And we ended up agreeing to like split it, I think 50-50, or we covered some of it. And not, we probably could have pushed back even more and just had them cover it, but it was only what, $2,000. And it's a long project. It was like over a year long project. And so you kind of just need to pick your battles, right? You want to save some of your ammo for some of the bigger stuff down the road. And I think that has helped us, use that kind of for later on. So that's been a difficult thing as well. And then lastly, I would say that leasing up units on your own, if you try to find tenants on your own, and just the whole tenant side of it, because we're managing this property ourselves, it takes a certain type of person. And my buddy partner Griffin, I think he was born for this stuff, to be honest, because man, when something happens, like if a sink is clogged, I feel like it's the biggest issue in the world because I just don't want the tenants to think, have a bad experience, right? But at the end of the day, that stuff can happen in a 6-unit property, and that stuff can happen in a 250-unit property, and it's not as big of a deal as I may think. But that can be difficult. So just understanding who's responsible for that part of the project, and like I said, in the operating agreement, it lists out exactly what people are going to do. And then we actually recently hired a realtor to lease out our last two units because we were kind of trying to do it ourselves on apartments.com and on Zillow.
Yep.
We should have got a realtor a lot earlier because once we got a realtor in, I think we leased the unit up in like 2 or 3 weeks, and
Oh, wow.
they would have paid for themselves essentially because they probably would have leased it up a lot quicker than we could have. So yeah, those are
What's a,
some lessons learned for the next one.
yeah. What's a typical fee, for hiring a real estate agent and getting that tenants?
I think typical is 1 month's rent.
Okay.
So one of our units we just rented for 1550. It's a 2 bedroom, 1 bath, and we're gonna pay them 1550 for their fee. I know friends of mine that pay realtors a flat fee of like $500, which is a lot better of a deal, but we're okay. The realtors, sent out a professional photographer. They took photography. They were handling all the communications, and it was a good experience. So we're okay paying that money for
Okay.
sure. And I'm sure it's all negotiable, right? If you have a bigger property, like let's say we hired them when we had 6 vacant units, well maybe we could have struck a deal because they knew that they would get income from 6 units versus only two. So it just depends on the situation.
Gotcha. And in terms of like background checks, et cetera, this is that taken care of by them, or is just finding all you care is finding a tenant?
Yeah, so Zillow actually has like it's all free, and they submit an application through Zillow, and they pay I think $35 or something, and it does the background check for them and all of like the income check requirements and stuff like that, which is really helpful. That's the biggest thing you want to make sure. For these types of properties, you can get a wide range of people, people with a criminal background that don't qualify for these bigger complexes because the complexes have strict requirements. But we pretty much have the same strict requirements as anyone else, right? Like no felonies, no aggressive breed of dogs, no prior evictions, credit over 600 and I think 635 maybe or something like that. Your income has to be like 3 times your monthly rent. And so sticking to that has been okay. We haven't had any issues so far in terms of the tenants being problems. The property has had just a couple small maintenance issues, but yeah, if you stick to those requirements and you'll be okay. There were times where people, there was someone who like made 2 times the monthly rent, and we really wanted to lease up the unit,
Yeah.
but we said we're just going to pass on it. We'll wait because the money sounds good now, but wait until you stop getting paid for 3 months because you have to evict somebody. It can hurt a lot more later on down the road.
Choose that risk versus gain
Yeah,
type of appetite, right? Yeah. No,
yeah,
so sort of good lessons, and like you mentioned, it's hard to, especially when you go with a long period of not getting anyone in the property, right? You tend to, at least for me personally, I start to get a little bit desperate of just trying to fill in that space, right? And yeah,
you start
it's
turning your daily rate down to like $25 or something like that.
exactly, yeah.
You gotta
Yeah.
be careful.
Best thing is to, yeah, stick to your guns, and what you that's why you calculate and you plan, right?
Yeah.
So I guess let's some advice for the viewers. If let's say what I guess you mentioned what you would do differently, but what would I do, or like can you kind of walk me through if I just drove by neighborhood, because I know every person here lives close to there's vacant houses, etc., right? But let's say they come across a multifamily unit, right?
Yeah.
How would you approach it, or how would you recommend this person approach this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I got a little bit lucky because one, you write down the address and then you go on to the tax assessor's website, right? You type the address in and it'll tell you who the owner is and what their actual mailing address is. So a lot of times for these small neighborhoods, their mailing address is actually where they live. It's like sometimes it's a couple houses down the street because they've owned it for so many years, they're from the area, whatever. So that's the first step is you want to grab that address, and if it's a local address, write a letter, drop it off, You could knock on the door if you have the confidence to do that. Or what I did, because it was a company address, I searched the company up and they actually had a public website. It was like for their property management company. So I gave them a call, left a voicemail, and that's how I heard back from them. If they don't have a website, you can also skip trace their contact information, which if you don't know who to go to, you're looking at him on the other side of the camera right here. That's what he does. But you can skip trace the address and it'll give you like a couple phone numbers that might be linked to that address and give them a call or shoot them a text message. Essentially what you want to do is try to get in contact with them somehow. And that's really the only two, other than you can try to find them on Facebook or something, which is a little more difficult and a little more creepy, I think. And that's how you start the conversation. This is actually what I've been trying to do lately, is get in touch with some homeowners that might be motivated to sell. And we're cold calling just a list of properties that we've kind of put together based on what they look like. You know, they look abandoned, foreclosed, whatever. And hope you can strike a deal, because sometimes people don't want to sell, but you'd be surprised. I got lucky on my first cold call with the 6-unit property. They wanted to sell, which that's stuff you only hear about on podcasts, that you tell yourself, man, how is that guy so lucky? Why am I not getting it? But I'm never lucky. I never win giveaways. I never win any of that stuff, but I guess I got lucky on this one. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Houston's such a massive city. So I think part of it is, I don't know, maybe it goes back to the whole manifestation that you had. But you're right. Sometimes it is a numbers game, but I would say, there's plenty of distress and there's plenty of vacant houses. And if you need help, just reach out to me and I can help you out as well. But yeah, no, that's good. So as far as, do you find it that a lot of these folks that you're reaching out, they've been called 1,000 times by wholesalers or anyone else, or have you gotten, to where they're open to have a conversation with you?
Yeah, no, I've actually gotten a couple people call us and they're open to it. The people that I've called, I think they're kind of just tired of being called on, especially over the past year or two. Like, everyone's property has skyrocketed in value. And so they have such a high expectation of what they can get for it, right? Like when you call them and you say, hey, I'll offer you $300,000, when I know that property, if you put it on the market, someone might buy it for $450, but it's not really it's worth $450 to somebody, right? Maybe they're house hacking it and there's value there, but for an investor, it's not, and we need to make money too, right? So there was that kind of gap in expectations that made things a little difficult. But what made it really a little bit easier is I approach it of like, hey, whenever I tell them, I say, hey, I live in Houston and I'm looking in my local area. I actually live a couple blocks away. It makes you become a real person, right? Instead of someone from overseas that you just found their address on a computer screen and you never even seen the property before. It adds that connection. And so they're actually more willing to hear you out, right? It's kind of like, if I walked down the street and knocked on someone's door and said, hey, I live down the road, they'd give me the time of day a little bit more than a random person that is from out of state or out of the city or whatever. But even still, you have people that just aren't interested at all, and you just have to take those no's on the chin and keep going, and you can't get your feelings hurt for sure, because think about it from their perspective, right? They have a piece of property that you don't know the situation. Maybe they've worked really hard for it or has sentimental value, and now you're coming in and just like randomly asking if you can take it off their hands. It might not strike them the right way all the time.
You mentioned something important, something key, right? I've heard people that say don't call it a home whenever you're talking to them, because there is a lot of sentimental value to it, and versus calling it a property or just a house, because even the I guess the word itself has a lot of weight to it. But yeah, so okay, so now if I get in touch with a person, maybe they're willing to hear me out. what are some of the, strategies that you use for negotiation or just to even get to that next step?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's understanding their situation first, right? Like, tell me a little bit about why you'd like to sell. If you can get that out from them, you can almost use that motivation piece to kind of lead the conversation. So like, oh, well, it's because I have another investment opportunity outside of the state. That's one that I've gotten before. And then it's like, okay, well, tell me a little bit more about that. If you were able to sell this property and that allowed you to invest in that opportunity out of state, how would your life look differently, or how would that change your situation? And then they start to, think these positive thoughts of, well, man, it would be really good because that investment opportunity is so cool and it's with a buddy of mine from high school and we've always wanted to do this. And it's like, oh man, that's great. Well, if we can come to a number today that you feel comfortable with that will allow you to do that, would you be able to sign on the dotted line? Oh, yeah, of course. Um, it sounds easy in practice. We haven't gotten uh, all the way to the finish line yet, but just kind of understanding their situation and then kind of allow them to set some of the, I guess, set some of the numbers, right? Kind of like turn it back on them, right? Like, oh, well, you're interested in selling. I'm sure you've done research on what investors are willing to pay for this property. What do you think the property is worth? Because you want to know where they're at first to kind of help guide the conversation. If they think the property's worth 250 and you think it's worth 150, but you didn't know they thought it was worth 250 and you just came right in at 150, they would be probably offended and like not want to continue the conversation. But if they said 250 and you could say, okay, well, tell me a little bit more about why you think it's worth that much. Is it renovated? Oh, no, not really. Oh, okay. Does it need work? Like any big repairs? Well, yeah, it actually needs a new roof. And when you have that information, like I said, use the information they give you to blurt it back out to them to kind of use it in your favor. So,
Gotcha. And then I guess from your perspective, how do you even calculate that, right? Like if you haven't, let's say you see the property from outside, you did your basic due diligence and, whether it's the appraisal district, et cetera. How do you go about calculating, whether,
yeah,
or do you ask yourself, what do I need this property for? Am I
yeah,
going to flip and fix or am I going to rent out? How do you approach that part?
yeah, absolutely. So, you have to have a maximum allowable offer, mayo. If you like mayo on your burger, you might like mayo in real estate as well. But no, it's called maximum allowable offer. And what I do, and this is what a lot of real estate investors, oh, and pretty much what it is you take what you think the property's worth after you repair it, right? And you multiply that number by, some people do 70% if you're trying to flip it, or some people do 75% or even 80%. So let's say the property's worth $100,000 after it's repaired. I'm going to multiply that by 75%. So that gets you to 75 grand. But I also know that the property needs 20 grand of rehab. So you take 20 grand off of the 75, and now you get to your maximum allowable offer of 55 grand. And that's like a back of the envelope rule of thumb on how to get to a number that you can give them. And also understand, like, once you come to this number, um, there's some room. Let's say they agree on it, but you walk the property and you find out that like there's some huge issue that you didn't realize. I mean, you can just be honest with the seller and try and negotiate even further. But essentially, that calculation just allows you to know where you will still be profitable at. And the reason why is because, like, if you want to flip it, let's just say, you have realtor commissions and you have holding costs and interest and all that stuff. So the 75% ratio allows that 25% on top to kind of account for all of those miscellaneous costs and your profit uh, as well. So yeah. And if you want to know what the after repaired value is, I mean, you can try to look on HAR. They can give you a range of what the property sold for, like comparable properties sold for. You would probably want to have a relationship with a realtor who can pull comps for you. But your decisions need to be driven by data. Your decisions cannot be driven by your emotions, because that's a quick way to get into trouble. I've been there on my first property. It has to be driven by data. If the numbers don't work, find a number that will make it work, right? If it doesn't work at $80,000, offer 70. Whatever that formula gives you, stick to that, and I think you'll be okay.
All right, man, you're dropping gems, real gems here. He basically just give you a whole blueprint of approaching a multifamily unit. And I guess one thing that I keep kind of hearing back, right, is one, I guess my takeaway is relationships, right? So you have relationships with some real estate agents, you have relationship with some wholesalers, right? So even they can help you as far as calculating the ARV or the MAO, MAO, maximum allowable um,
Offer,
I
yeah,
offer. There you go. So
yeah.
no, this is great, man, and this is exactly what I would want it for as far as the this live for you to kind of share everything that you know, and I think you've done that just well.
Cool.
Um, so now, what else? I guess yeah, I mean that's you cover most of it. So we'll
I
jump
will
into a
say
bit.
one
Go
more
ahead.
thing really quick, just so that maximum allowable offer works, and that ARV that I was telling you about is driven by comps. But if you're looking at multifamily, it's not only driven by comps, but it's driven by the income that you're expecting that property to produce. So you can have two properties next to each other, and they're exactly the same. They look exactly the same, but the rents are greater on one than the other. Well, the as is value is going to be different on both of those properties because the income on them is different. Now, theoretically, they should be the same because they look the same, the characteristics are the same. But that also goes into your ARV as well on multifamily because an appraiser is going to look at comps like dollar per square foot, dollar per unit type of metrics, but also look at what cap rate it's sold on. So essentially, what your cap rate is, it's like a percent, it's like your NOI, your net operating income over whatever the sold price was. So if you have like $50,000 of NOI and your property sold for $1 million, then you got a 5% cap rate. And that's how multifamily is compared to one another, is that cap rate percentage. So that's just a nuance that you have to keep in mind when you go to commercial type of real estate.
Gotcha. And I guess one thing regarding like the actual financing of it, right? Let's say, multifamily ones are probably well, they're quite more expensive than your single one. But as far as the financing piece of it, what do you recommend approaching it? Is it owner finance just like you did, or is there a lot of other creative kind of means?
Yeah, so you have owner financing, you have traditional financing, which is like through a bank of some sort, like a very traditional bank that requires 20, 25% down, a lot of background checks and all that other stuff. And then there's bridge financing, which is like an intermediary, or it's also hard money can be considered bridge financing. And they're a lot less strict, but they're more expensive and they have a higher interest rate. So for the reason why bridge financing is useful is because if it's a value add property, like you can fix it up and add value, well, maybe you can borrow the short term financing from hard money and pay a higher interest rate, but you're able to only come out of pocket like 10, 15%. So you have less money that you actually need to take the property down because the hard money will give you a higher leverage amount. And with the money that they give you, you're going to add value by, you know, doing renovations. So once you actually finish the construction, you've added value. Now you can go get a traditional bank to finance it because it actually looks good and has tenants in it, right? My property that I bought would not have gotten any type of traditional financing because it was vacant, run down, they were not safe. So if you find those types of properties, you need to get creative by like seller financing or hard money slash bridge financing. Um, Hard money and bridge are very similar, but some bridge lenders are not really hard money lenders. It's kind of a technicality. But so those are the three types. that you have to do. Eventually, I mean, you can have a seller finance note for 30 years if you agree to it. But eventually, whether that's in 2 years, a year, 6 months, or 30 years, you will need to refinance into some type of normal loan, right? I mean, that just makes the most sense usually. And so that's going to be through a bank or through, depending on the size of the property, like life insurance companies or agency like Fannie, Freddie, like government-backed agencies that give loans out as well. And you can, if you speak to a mortgage broker, like a commercial mortgage broker, they'll give you all the options that you can use.
that you can have.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Hey, well, thanks a lot for walking us through that and kind of, again, sharing all your knowledge
Yeah,
and
sure.
what it takes to get a hold of a person and go through that process. So, just being respectful of your time, we'll move on. So, a few next things here. Um, I want to know what's next with you. What are some of your plans?
Sure. So, like I said, my day job, I work for a real estate development company. We build Class A luxury type apartment complexes in big in major cities. And so I want to keep being successful in that role because I'm learning a lot of information that I can use for myself in the future. And then I'm really looking for a flip at the moment. Um, that doesn't necessarily mean to sell it. I'm not exactly sure where the market's going to go over the next handful of months. So I'm looking for another project. It doesn't have to be a multifamily. It could be a single family or a duplex, but just something to keep me busy. Uh, I would like something in the East End area, Eastwood area, but that's like my immediate next step is to just do another project. And then also, I am part of a company called Ladybird Property Solutions. And what we're doing is essentially targeting motivated sellers um, about their properties. And so we're trying to find, you know, off-market properties that we can buy at a discount, essentially becoming a wholesaler, but we might wholesale some properties or keep them for ourselves. So that's a big venture that we've kind of been getting some good traction on lately. And so that's our next, that's like my next project in the immediate future.
Gotcha. All right. Well, good to hear, and good luck with that.
Yeah, thanks.
And I guess my last question is, what's your money motto or money mantra?
Oof. Uh, that's a good question. Um, I think it'd probably be like whatever you don't measure, you can't manage. That's like a term that people use. And essentially what I mean by that is I like track my finances pretty like religiously every 2 weeks. I pull open my net worth tracker and I plug in my updated net worth. And I look at my credit card balances. And I look at, my retirement accounts and stuff like that. And kind of like what you were saying is like manifesting. Um, Before I was kind of just putting money in the bank, not with no real plan. But if I actually measure where my finances are, I think I can manage them better and use them more to my advantage. And
Mhm.
so I guess that's something I've been thinking about lately. So you can say that's my money mantra as of late.
Oh, that's definitely important. I think even I read an article recently that people were making over 250,000. I think it was 60%. They're still living paycheck to paycheck. So
Yeah, yeah.
regardless if you make a lot of money, right? I think a lot of us don't do our due diligence in budgeting, so that can definitely run sideways. That's great. You mentioned earlier you're also trying to achieve fire, you and your wife.
Well, I don't have an exact plan. It's I'm not strict on it,
Yeah.
but that's the goal, and I know that real estate's going to help me get there. I am missing some. I'm missing like a balanced um, path to that, if that makes sense. I don't have a
Mhm.
specific goal in terms of my publicly traded like retirement accounts and public accounts, but I do know I want to be financially independent and retire early. That's why I have like the side hustles and the real estate. Uh, so yeah, but I'm not, and that is one of my goals is to become a little more clear on what that actually means. I haven't actually mapped out what number I need to hit to make that happen. I haven't mapped out, my current investing rate. When will I hit that number? Um, so it's not really, I'm not measuring it at the moment, so I can't
Yeah.
manage it at the moment. But yes, it's something that's kind of motivating the decisions that I make today, So like be conservative with my spending where we can be, try to not have any like credit card debt unless it's being used to make me money, which is another like leverage. The whole leverage thing is
Exactly.
important. So yeah.
All right, no, that's great. Well, I might have to invite you again to chit chat about your other side hustles, like the e-commerce and stuff. But
Sure,
for
yeah.
now, tell everyone where you can follow you. I know you touched on you have your Ladybird Properties wholesale business as well. I guess this is your time to promote yourself. And what do you got?
Yeah, so I don't really market myself too much, but you can follow me here on Instagram. Obviously, I have I think two reels that kind of show you my past two projects that I've done in real estate. So if you want to take a look at that, I'm on LinkedIn, which is like just the professional Facebook. And then if you look up Ladybird Property Solutions on Instagram, we do have an account right now. It's very new, so we only have a couple posts. But once we get some more activity going, we'll keep everyone
Awesome.
updated. So
All right, well, good to hear. Well, yeah, hopefully we hear more from you. I know you're pretty active in the real estate
oh
networking events
yeah,
around Houston, so hopefully, if anybody goes out, I'm sure they'll meet Jake, and
you'll
pleasure
probably see
talking
me
to you.
there. You'll probably see me there. So definitely say hi if you guys are at one of those events. And it'll definitely be a lot of fun. But thanks for the invite. Thanks for having me. I'm glad that we got to do this. And I look forward to keeping up with all your content because it's been educational. So I'm sure we'll talk some more about some of the stuff you got going on your side.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Jake. Well, you take care, and thanks again for joining us. And I'm sure if you just got here, rewatch the episode because he dropped a lot of knowledge gems. So be sure to write them down and take action. So, all right. Well, thanks again, and yeah, have a good night, man.
Yeah, thanks, man. We'll talk soon.
Take
Bye.
care. See ya.